if you feel good, you're probably going to feel good tomorrow also. And that's probably going to carry over to the next day, and just do things that feel really good to you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I have a wonderful person and friend, Casey. I have gotten to know Casey Ruff through a couple of conferences. We've done some interviews together. It has been so much fun. And I just think I do consider you to be a world changer and have an incredible impact. What episode are you now on your Boundless Body podcast?
We're getting up to about 500. I think I might have like 500 recorded, and we haven't released like 10 of them, including your episode.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So yeah, just a small thing, just tickling 500 episodes. Okay, tell me about you. Tell us about why you started the podcast.
Emily, it's so good to chat with you. I'm so glad we met at Low Carb Denver and got to reconnect at KetoCon. You're just such a wonderful person, such a good instructor. So it's an honor to be here today. Okay, so, a lot of this started with our careers in personal training. I've been fortunate enough to do this for quite a while. I started personal training in March of 2007. So I've been doing it for over 16 years now. And, a lot of personal trainers, it's a tough job. It's a 100% commission. We were working for a big corporate gym. There's a lot of competition between the trainers. You're trying to, sell packages and sell sessions to people. And yeah, a lot of people don't really make it a long-term career. And I've been really fortunate to be able to do that. Everything kind of changed in March of 2020. It was actually the weekend that I was at Low Carb Denver 2020 when the world blew up and everybody was on lockdown. The program that I was running in my club was all to do with measuring metabolic rate, which we can get into if you want. But basically that involved standing next to a treadmill with a person wearing a mask that had a hole in front of it that was concentrated respirations as they were working out. So clearly that wasn't going to go through during the pandemic. So even before our gym closed down, they shut down my program due to safety of a respiratory virus going around. And so we were unemployed in that time. And my wife does the same thing. She worked for the same company, just not as long as I had. And it was a really confusing time. And we ended up deciding that we were just going to start our own business. We wanted to find different ways to work with people, virtually, or, our same clients that wanted a continuation of their workouts. They just weren't traveling to the gym anymore. Maybe they were dusting off their weights and, resistance bands and things like that. And so we ended up starting our own company so that we could continue working with primarily our people. And, we put things out there to try to drive new business. And again, try to just be pragmatic in a weird time where we couldn't work in the same way that we had worked with people in the past. So that was really awesome. And I knew really early on that I wanted to do a podcast. Podcasting is just really special to me because that's the way I've learned about all of this stuff. It was the Joe Rogan podcast featuring Dr. Sean Baker. That was the first time I heard about the carnivore diet, which I thought was so preposterous that I turned off halfway through. I didn't even finish listening to it until like last year, even though I've been a coach for his company for like 3 years. And so, yeah, it was just a special thing that was a way that I learned and I wanted to give back. And so it was a few months later that we started Boundless Body Radio, the podcast. And I just have to say, like, it's really more selfish than anything. Like, I'm happy that we've done as many episodes as we've done. But it was very early on in like November of 2020 that I got into the cadence of releasing an episode every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and sometimes an episode on the weekend. And I'm just so grateful and so fortunate for all the people in the beginning that I reached out to, people that I'd followed for years. Dr. Bill Schindler was one, Dr. Ben Bickman, Dr. Sean Baker, we've already mentioned, Scott Mazinski. These people, I reached out and asked them if they'd like to be on my rinky-dink little show that had no listeners at the time, and we were just getting started. And so many people said, yeah, I'd love to be on your show. And I've got to have some amazing conversations. And again, it's kind of selfish that I settled into the cadence of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and have been able to keep it up for almost 3 years now. So if you enjoy something a lot, which I do, and you are too stupid to stop, you just keep going at it, and all of a sudden you've like built up something that and at the end I'm like really proud of, and so excited for your episode to drop. And I've gotten to meet so many people along the way, and it's been a really fun journey.
Wow. Yeah, I think I'm at recording about episode 2021. I have really only one true episode released because the other ones were of folks interviewing me. I have an episode out with Dr. Anthony Chapin. So that was really fun because I just asked one question and he just like, shoo, you've had him on, I assume.
He's a 1, 2, maybe 3 question guest for sure.
Yes.
He's great.
I know. I love it. How has it evolved and changed since you've started? You got into the cadence with the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, And so has the podcast changed much? And how has like your practice changed? I mean, since you went all virtual and now are you back in some physical, some virtual? What's that like these days?
For the training or for recording episodes?
For the training, actually. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So for the training itself, we were doing in-person stuff during the pandemic. We had to adapt. Like, the story that we were hearing back in 2020 is you would be protecting other people, even if you weren't ever sick or weren't going to get sick. We weren't really worried about us getting sick. You hear so often in the low carbohydrate space, like you start living this way of life and you don't really ever get sick at all. It's kind of nice. So we just found other ways, like the number of sessions that I did using resistance bands at the park, on monkey bars, on
Oh,
trees.
gotcha.
Like, yeah, even to this day, we still, because people like to be outside. Yesterday I did 2 sessions literally in different parks on different trees. So using resistance bands, and people got great workouts. So yeah, you just adapted depending on the level of, what level people were comfortable with. I work now in a lot of basements and garages and shared spaces and all that kind of stuff. And during the pandemic, I've trained people on the banister of their stairs. So we just had to kind of dance with whatever situation was ongoing at the moment. But yeah, it's nice. We learned how to be a lot more practical and a lot more pragmatic. If you would have told me before the pandemic, if somebody could get really good results using resistance bands or a TRX system or a very limited amount of weight, I would have said absolutely not. You need access to a full gym and lots of different equipment, and you need to leverage those tools to be able to get good results. And I absolutely don't think that's true. I think most people, if they've got somebody they're working with, if they're just learning how to lift weights, go grab a $30 set of resistance bands from Amazon. You will have all the resistance you absolutely need, and you can crush yourself doing workouts. So that's helped us understand how to, again, be a lot more pragmatic with people and understand that we can save them time and save them money by not needing a gym membership per se. We have equipment that fits in a bag that I can take around with me and train people on, and that works really well.
That is phenomenal. So I'm curious, you used to use, I definitely want to hear about the metabolic rate and how do you assess that now? Are you still using that, or have you figured out other ways that you can get the information that is helpful?
It's a great question. That's a really, really great question. I'm assuming the program that was at that corporate gym that I was working on, I'm assuming it came back at some point, and there's definitely other companies that we could work with to get a metabolic analyzer. They're pretty sophisticated, and we're really limited with the space that we have here. So, I mean, a metabolic cart, if you can imagine, is this kind of like big table with a computer on it. It's got a box that is the analyzer that's analyzing all the oxygen and carbon dioxide and airflow that's coming in from an umbilical, from a piece of cardio equipment. So it's pretty involved. I would say that I was fortunate enough to do it for as long as I did. I worked on it for over 13 years. And part of what I was doing, at least for a little while, was I was in charge of the entire West region for my corporate gym. So I was training other trainers on how to use the carts, how to interpret the data, how to present the data. So I have quite a bit of experience in that field, to where I can say now pretty confidently, I don't necessarily need that tool. It wouldn't ever really change my recommendations. It's what made me get to find a low carbohydrate diet to begin with. And so it never really changed my explaining of things. It's a nice tool. It's great. If I had one, I would definitely use it and love it. But no, I haven't used it for the last 3 years. And I find that, again, if you share people the right advice, that stuff kind of takes care of itself anyway.
I love it. Okay, so I want to get into the foundations. What are the foundations? Obviously you've mentioned low carb. And so this is all about metabolism and metabolic rate of what we're trying to do to improve our lives. And obviously, exercise, being a trainer, that's going to be a huge component of it. What are the basics, and what are the issues that you think people are not as aware of, that they don't understand? And so I want to hear, like, what are the big aha moments that people are learning when they're turning their metabolism around?
Such another great question. So I guess I'll go back in 2007 when I first started. It was really apparent to my manager at the time that I was new as a trainer, but I had significant experience using heart rate monitors. I had used one in my own life since I was 18 with training for cycling. And so I knew more about how to use heart rate monitors than any of the other training staff as a new trainer. I knew nothing about personal training, even though the day you get your certification, you know everything there is to know about personal training. And it ends up being less and less true every single day you work. they had decided pretty early on that I was going to be trained to use these metabolic carts. And so basically what we're doing when we hook somebody up to one of these machines is we're analyzing somebody's breath. So the breath ends up being this really interesting kind of key to unlocking and understanding how we use our calories. And so the first thing that we really knew when we first got started with these is the number of calories that you would burn either at rest or while you were exercising at different intensities. So basically, we'd put that mask on, you'd breathe in and out into this mask. The machine would analyze it and would tell me at rest, Emily, you at rest when you're not doing anything as a baseline are burning, say, 1,500 calories. And so you could say like, okay, you want to lose weight. We'd have a little slider that would say, okay, what's your activity level during the day? Are you very active? That's a higher number. Or do you sit for the day? That's a lower number. How many calories you're planning on exercising? We'll add that into the equation. And then we'll go to the other side and that will determine how many calories you need to be eating. So we have another slider and we'll say like, what is the rate of desired weight loss? Say you want to lose 1 pound a week and you burn 1,500 calories at rest. And when we add up all the other stuff, let's say that number is 2,500 calories. All we would need to do is adjust the food slider down by 500 calories. If you wanted to lose a pound a week, that's a 500 calorie delta between the two numbers. And so in 1 week, you would lose 1 pound because 1 pound is 3,500 calories. So if you had 20 pounds to lose, we would just do that, change the sliders, get you to that rate of a 500 calorie daily deficit for 20 weeks. And in 20 weeks, you will have lost the 20 pounds perfectly linear, no problems. It would just go 1 pound, 1 pound, 1 pound, and you would get to your target weight. And of course, if you're listening and you've ever tried that, that has worked exactly like 0 times. That does
Thank
not
you. Oh, I'm so happy
ever,
for that punchline.
ever work. It's
Thank you.
hugely problematic. We're talking about very sophisticated equipment. We're talking about really very well calculated numbers. It's just a quagmire. It's just your metabolic rate can change day to day, week to week. It could be different today if you had more stress. It could be on the tracking end of things. How do you know that an apple is 60 calories? What apple? When did they measure that one apple? Was that last week, last year? What kind? Is it the softball size apples we're used to seeing at Costco year round? Like, it's just a mess and it just would not work. And so as trainers, it was great because we would put people on these numbers, tell people to do what they needed to do. And we'd always have people coming back to us saying like, wow, this isn't working. And we would just do the, what Jason Fun talks about blaming the victim. We just blame you for not being really good at following.
Customer. You created a lifelong customer, like a Weight Watcher or like a whatever. Okay.
1,000%. It was great for business. It's a great way to get somebody coming back to you thinking that they suck. They don't have the right willpower. They're not doing things correctly. They were wondering why their cravings went up. They would wonder, if they've been doing this long enough and living in a caloric deficit, why did they start feeling kind of cold and a little tired and like motivation would run out even in a week, like by Thursday or Friday, all the food you spent hours meal prepping on Sunday sounds terrible or is going bad. And you're tired from these crappy workouts where all you're concentrating on is burning calories. So right off the bat, we kind of learned that if you put somebody in too much of a caloric deficit and we remeasured your resting metabolic test, your metabolism would drop and that would hinder future results the more and more times you did it. In fact, I did it once on a Biggest Loser contestant. This was maybe 10 years ago. After she had been kicked off of the show and come back, she wanted to see how it had affected her metabolism by working out 6 hours a day and eating 1,200 calories. And her metabolic rate was in the toilet. It was tanked. It was like 1,000 calories less after the contest than it was before, which we know based on that study they did, I believe in 2016, that happens. And that's why people would gain the weight. So that would be kind of the resting side of things. And then we would do another type of test where we'd ramp people up. This is typically more looking like a VO2 max test where we're measuring how much oxygen somebody can take in. But we're also measuring the calories that people would burn as they were exercising at different rates and things like that. So that's where I really got a kind of a good idea and understanding of how the human body uses calories. And our machines were quite cool because not only would they measure the total volume of air that you're breathing in and out, which would tell you how many calories you burn, but they would also measure the exchange ratio of oxygen and carbon dioxide that you're breathing in and out. And that gave us a further clue as to not just how many calories you were burning, but where are the calories coming from? Because you can burn fat as an energy source, or you can burn carbohydrates as an energy source. And you will get a different amount of carbon dioxide as a byproduct of your breathing when you're breathing using those different energy systems. And that's where we got much further understanding of how exercise impacts our metabolism, how overexercise impacts our metabolism, and how especially the real revelation was how diet changes not only how many calories you burn, but where are those calories coming from and how you can shift it towards burning carbohydrates, or really what most people want to do, shift their metabolism toward burning fat.
Absolutely. And so what are the key or the components or the beginner steps when somebody's wanting to burn fat as their calories?
So yeah, the biggest change in my understanding was that you could manipulate somebody's fat burning metabolism, especially while exercising, by consuming fat as a fuel source and limiting the amount of carbohydrates as a fuel source. So as a competitive cyclist, that was really important to me. And I knew what cyclists knew at the time. You consume tons of carbohydrates. You can't go on a ride that's longer than an hour, hour and a half without bonking, which is essentially you just burning through the very finite, teeny tiny amount of carbohydrates your body can store. If you're working out in those higher heart rate zones, you're burning primarily carbohydrates. So those are running out very quickly. You need to top off. And so, bottles filled with sugar and maltodextrin and all the goos and the gels and the bars and, nasty bananas, all kinds of crap you have to eat before, you'd have to eat during, you'd have to eat after. There's just part of it. We just knew that was what you did. And in 2012, I learned of a coach who was using these same analyzers, but he was getting his world-class triathletes to eat butter and bacon and cream, and they would be okay as they would ride. They wouldn't need hundreds of calories. They would eat like 50 or 60 calories every single hour, rather than what I was trying to do, which is consume like 200 or 300 calories of carbohydrates every single hour, and try not to have my stomach blow up. And it was just such a shift in thinking of like, wait a second, like we can eat fat and that will change how our bodies use fat. Like that didn't make any sense to me at all. It was totally foreign. But sure enough, I started to work that in a little bit more. Eat the avocados. All of a sudden my salads had some olive oil on them. I would eat almonds and walnuts. That was new for me. And we just kind of slowly started to understand that, wait a second, maybe fat isn't as bad as we had thought it was. And so if somebody is just starting on this journey, that would really be the first step, is understanding that like if you want to burn more fat, you need to introduce fat as your fuel source initially by consuming more of it and get your body used to that and slowly kind of take down the carbohydrates. And that puts you in a much more fat burning state. And from there, you can do all kinds of different things to burn off your own stored body fat, which is what, again, everybody seems to really want when for good justification.
I love it. It's so beautiful. And so your approach changed. Did you notice changes in your body? I mean, you're a fitness instructor. You obviously have a lot of fitness things going on that's going to be a major factor, right? Because the stimulus of the muscle is like a huge issue, separate from diet, right? Or else we wouldn't even see people that have horrible diets that look how amazing at the gym. So how did that change for you? How important is the diet in the physique part?
Yeah, great question. Emily, I'm a really slow learner. So as I'm saying these things, I'm telling you, this took me like years and years. Like learning all of this in 2012, I didn't even really deep dive into a ketogenic diet until like 2018. So I'm a very slow learner here. Physique wise, I was in my 20s, getting into my 30s. And so I was okay with physique. The things I noticed the most is like, wow, like I guess I don't need a nap every day, or I don't need a granola bar between clients every 2 to 3 hours. Like I just like kind of started to feel a little better. My meals are making me a little bit more full, which I probably didn't fully appreciate at the time. Or more than that, like going on a 2 or 3 hour bike ride, it's like I just need significantly less of the carbohydrates. I don't need to take these on all the time. It was like 2014, 2015 that I was introduced to The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. And I remember listening to a radio interview with her, and I have to say, I think I resisted it quite a bit because I understood the concept and could think in my mind, like, if Nina's right about some of this stuff, then I've been totally wrong about all this stuff. And so I maybe that was part of me being a slow learner, is I just, kind of resisted the idea that, maybe we don't need grains, we don't need fruits and vegetables as much as we think we do. And so learning that was really helpful, and starting to get my clients on, at the very least, just fat is not that bad for you. Eat more fat, be a little bit more satiated. So we started to see better results. We started to see, using our metabolic test, that people's fat burn could increase at rest and during exercise. So it would be a lot harder for them to bonk. Um, during endurance sports, so they could lose fat a little bit easier without crashing their metabolic rate, which is really nice. Definitely a step backwards for me was in 2017 when I got my official nutrition coaching certification. And this is a very well-respected company. It's kind of the industry standard for nutrition coaching. And I went through that program, and it just really reinforced some of those old beliefs that I had, that you need fruits and vegetables, balance your meals. This is how much, a lean protein you need. This is how much grains you need in a meal. This is how many fruits and vegetables you need in a meal. Eat the rainbow. And it was, about nutrition. It's shocking to go back and see that ketogenesis is mentioned one time in one sentence in this entire textbook that's here behind me. It's huge. One time. And like, you could understand metabolism by including a chart from Dr. Cahill's studies in the 60s and 70s when he was doing fasting. You'd know more about metabolism if you just read that one study. And none of that was what I was taught. And so it really pushed me kind of further back. Like, yeah, you need some fat, and fat's okay, but you also need lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and you need to eat 6 meals a day. And that type of coaching was great for return clients because it's behavior coaching, and they were big on that. And so it's like, well, you screwed up in the last 2 weeks since we last saw. Did you record your meals? Did you write down your feelings? Did you try a new vegetable last week? Did you prepare all your meals on Sunday? There's an endless amount of ways to blame somebody and get somebody to come back to you. It's highly emotional. We always kept the Kleenexes in the nutrition coaching room because somebody would end up crying. And yeah, that set me back a little bit on what was actually getting people results. In fact, they had a software program that nutrition coaches could pay for, that then they could put their clients on, and the clients would go through this year-long curriculum of like daily lessons, weekly habits. It was videos and check-ins and reports and weigh-ins and workouts. Emily, I had hundreds of people that I put on there to see if it would work and to see what kind of results they would get. Two people ever finished the program. One had hundreds of pounds to lose. He lost maybe 80. I think he rebounded. The other person probably didn't lose any. And yeah, you're just made to feel like you're failing, and most people would drop off. So it sucks. And it wasn't until really understanding, the keto trend and keto and fasting and how that impacted metabolism and also fat loss, that I really ditched that kind of thing. So that was a big setback.
Oh man. So I deal with that just even when, now that my friends know that I do carnivore coaching, low carb coaching, that I've gotten involved with this, and they'll kind of reach out to me, and it's interesting. Even now, I still have, I still want to tread lightly, because I don't want them to like throw out my concepts together all together. And so I kind of do this gradual thing that you're talking about don't fear the fats. That's the first step, is to not fear the fats. But we have so much of that mentality that is just entrenched about what our plate's supposed to look like, and the check-ins and the account. What things, like, you now primarily coach low carb, carnivore, what things came with you from that old mindset, that old training, these check-ins, these journaling, these kinds of things? Did any of that move forward with how you coach people now?
It was just like you, probably a really gradual process. But by and large, the longer I do this, no, I just think that the more inputs we have, it makes things more confusing. And look, like, if somebody wants to do blood work, or they want to do these metabolic assessments, if they want to track their heart rate, or they want to count their calories, like, that's all fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. But I so much love the notion that Dr. Sean Baker talks about, that it's like, if you feel good, you're probably going to feel good tomorrow also. And that's probably going to carry over to the next day, and just do things that feel really good to you. And I think we, as humans, we want objective data. We want the exact answer. We want the formula and the meal plans that you're not going to stick with anyway. Like, we want to look at our blood and say, like, wow, this is high, this is low. Well, yeah, on that one day, that one time, measured completely out of context, you really just don't know that much about it and how all these things are interacting with each other. It's so complicated that the more and more I do this, the more I try to keep things very, very simple for people. And I like the order that you went in. For most people, they're not ready to jump onto full carnivore, but they can, learn about foods. And a great thing to think about when they've been used to restriction and what do I cut out of my diet? What can we add in? What can we just throw into the diet? Let's start with adding some fat. Let's eat that fat with protein the way that it's found in nature. And let's just see, like, what if we knock out your afternoon hunger and slump and need for coffee? What if we knock out the need to eat after dinner because you feel pretty satiated and good because you had some burger patties? And yeah, maybe it's not perfect in the beginning, but if you keep moving in that right direction, I think that's when you really get to the true healing power of a carnivore diet.
Amazing. Tell me a little bit about your journey with carnivore. When did you start, and are you strict carnivore, or are you a little bit flexible? How does that work for you?
Yeah. So as I was learning, part of what we were doing at the gym was learning, we were doing like weight loss contests that the gym made us do. And so when we had one of our weight loss people do a ketogenic diet and won the contest, and we got recognized for it, my wife and I changed the way we did our little weight loss contest that we were forced to do by the company anyway. We were giving people low carbohydrate diet plans, and people in our little group knew that they were doing this like weird little rogue kind of thing that not everybody else was doing. And we had great success with that over the years. So that helped me to understand. That really kicked off my obsession with learning about ketogenic diets. I was getting pinned in at my gym. Like people started calling me Keto Casey, and I was that guy. And I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to help everybody. And I'm so glad I had a business mentor that was like, yo, like just embrace this. Like if this is what you're known for, jump in and commit yourself to this one thing, and other people can deal with whatever they want to deal with. And then that's what I decided to do. It was like the last time that I listened to music in my car, or you know what I mean? Like didn't want to like learn about this on my free time or spend my vacation days and times at conferences hanging out with you versus hanging out at the beach or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so as far as carnivore goes, I was, pretty convinced that low carbohydrate was wonderful. It was really working for me at the time, 2018, 2019. My endurance was far better. I was to the point that I'm doing, 2, 3, 4 hour bike rides and hockey games with no food, nothing on me. I could fast really easily. And that was a total game changer. But yeah, I heard the Joe Rogan podcast in 2018 about this doctor who's doing this crazy diet, and he was feeling really good, and I turned it off when he said that he didn't recommend like a lot of like blood work, which I thought was ludicrous. But over time, listening to other people in the space like Paul Saladino, when he was like kind of more um he yeah, when he had a different opinion than he does now, I'll just say that. um you really helped my understanding of like, wait a second, these fruits and vegetables and plants and grains, maybe it's not just that they're like not essential, but maybe they can cause harm. And if nothing else, maybe practically it would just be easier if I just tried this and didn't have to worry about any of that. So I started my carnivore journey for 30 days in April of 2019. And it was, my digestion was a little off. I found that it was really easy, but I have to say, like, the biggest surprise was it was about a week or two in that I realized that I was calm and peaceful and I wasn't spinning in my brain. And
Wow.
I didn't ever think I had a problem with anxiety. I was never diagnosed with anything. I felt like I dealt with everything fine, but like I wasn't all of a sudden. And I realized I had dealt with that my whole life, and like worrying about all the things that are never going to happen. And like
Mm.
if stuff was fine. There was a big refund that came through that was costing me hundreds of dollars. And I was like, okay, cool. Like that's fine. Like if you need any help down the road, that's fine. I just dealt with everything so much better. And yeah, that was the most surprising thing. So May 1st rolled around and I didn't change anything. It wasn't worth it for me to have, that loss of the peace and calm that I got in my brain, which was wonderful. And I've been varying degrees of strictness over time. Like during the pandemic, we kind of opened up a little bit, and I was, doing burgers with buns and brats with buns and that kind of thing. And, maybe doing some, onions and peppers and that kind of thing. Summer of 2021, it's kind of a funny thing. So in Utah, in Salt Lake, where I live, there's a holiday called Pioneer Day, and it's when the Mormon pioneers came into the valley. It sounds weird, but it's like around here, it's like bigger than the 4th of July. It's a huge holiday, but it's mostly like the Mormons that celebrate that. And so the people that aren't Mormon made up a holiday called Pie and Beer Day. So on that day, they have pie and beer rather than celebrate Pioneer Day. And it was 2 years ago, and I bought a pie, and not a problem. It's an occasional thing for me, and I had some and had some and had some and had all that I wanted and kept going. And then I kept going, and then I kept going and kept going and kept going. And I leveled the entire pie. And that night I didn't get good sleep, and the anxiety just spinning, spinning, spinning. Business is going to fail. House is going to burn down. Wife's going to leave me. The dogs are going to die. Like all these crazy scenarios that it just grabbed me in my brain. And from that day on, I kind of understood that, look, I'm probably a sugar addict. I hate to admit it. You know, I love moderation. I would love to have ice cream every now and again. I would love to have, French fries. Like we took a trip a few weeks ago and I had French fries and I ate the whole thing. I ate all of them. I can't have them. If for me, it's
Mhm.
just I can't have them. And it sucks. And I don't tell everybody they have to be this way, but for me personally, I don't know when to stop. And that's kind of problematic. And it's just not worth feeling crappy. It's just really not. I can be abstinent of those things and feel really good. And that's its own reward for me. And so I'm fairly strict. Sugar's the big thing. I can't have sugar. Seed oils aren't great for me, but if I had sugar, especially like that triggers my anxiety. Yeah, it's not worth it for me. Yeah, if I have an occasional piece of pizza like once a year, twice a year, it's not that bad. But what about you? Like you're also pretty much an abstainer, aren't you?
Abstainer, absolutely. And I just love this, Casey. And I feel like we learn so much about each other, like, and about ourselves in the carnivore journey. You learned something about yourself versus when we were before that and, would get into sugar. For me, it was keto treats. And I had no
Yeah.
stop combining a sweet taste with a fat taste was going to be a binge. And it was so like, opposed to the peace that I had when I was fasting. That's when I figured out that peace, that food freedom, that zen, and that calm is when I became really adapted to fasting and would get deep into a fast and would feel like I could have that clarity. And like it just like I had a deep breath and I just didn't care. Whatever the stresses were that were just bugging me, it's just like, I don't care. And
Yeah.
not in a bad way, in a really healthy way. Like it was just in perspective. And so that was my appeal to coming to carnivore. I had known a friend that had had that food freedom and had kind of released her emotional war with food. And that was my main motivator. And what I figured
Oh,
out then when I came up with it, I was still losing weight. And so the weight loss really ramped up and the exercise, like it was my finisher. My first 100 pounds was keto with fasting. Last 50 was fasting with carnivore. But I love what you learned about yourself. And yeah, I am absolutely abstainer. I can't mess with it. I can't get, if I get into it, even if I have a piece of gum, it'll be like, oh man, the little demon starts coming in and wants more and more. But I think it's a really fine line because as much as we're saying that the old way with maybe like the bodybuilder styles and eating, that you always had a way to blame your customer and to blame your consumer to get them to be hooked in and come back. In that same way, I do have a little bit of an issue with the addiction model and the addiction word and saying it's purely addiction because I don't know, there's something about that doesn't sit completely with me, but it does help me on that abstinence road. It does help me say that, yeah, one bite is never enough. I don't really experiment with it. To me, it is just better at gatherings, at barbecues. I was just at my mom's and she had homemade ice cream, two different
uh,
flavors. And thankfully, I had eaten before I went. That was my big power tool that I do. And I ate while I was there. I brought some bacon and, there were some meat options that I could have. But I am so glad that I just didn't even, because I thought about it. It's like, oh, I could taste it. But I'm like, where does one taste go? It just goes to a hole that it's, I don't want to deal with the stress of getting out of it. I can get out of it now. I know that I'm able to, but I don't want to go through that process. And I
yeah.
don't want to take the mental hit because the mental benefits of the carnivore has been so strong that it's just like that. That's my option. That's where I want to stay.
I love that. That's such a great way to say that. And like I kind of say like, yeah, is fruit the bad thing for you? And it's like maybe not, but what comes after the fruit? If I eat fruit,
Yes.
I'm gonna be pretty hungry. Like I don't enjoy being pretty hungry if I grab an apple off a tree between clients and then spend the rest of the hour just starving all of a sudden, that really sharp kind of hunger that you used to get. Yeah, it's just it's not the fruit necessarily, but what did the fruit trigger? And now what do I want? I want all the food and I want all the bad food that normally I don't really care about. So I love that you said that. And I just have to say the fasting thing was so interesting. Imagine learning you're running these metabolic carts and you learn over time that if you do a diet, you restrict your calories, your metabolism drops. Okay. So now it's getting to that 2019, 2020. people are learning about keto, they're learning about fasting, you're measuring people, you're hearing what they eat, and it's really not a lot of calories because they're doing fasting. What do you do? What do you say when now somebody's metabolic rate on less calories isn't low, it's not normal, it's high. It's like really high. It's higher by hundreds of calories than what it should be. And I'm seeing this and being like, wow, like this looks really good. And like the percentage of fat that you're burning is really high. Like at rest, you're burning like 80% of your calories from fat, and your metabolism hundreds of calories higher than what it should be. I couldn't reconcile those two things. I couldn't figure out why people weren't crushing their metabolic rate because they were eating less. And it was fasting, and understanding that fasting is vastly different than reducing your calories. If you stop eating, your body has no choice but to burn stored fat. And it's so encouraging to hear personal stories like yours, where you lost so much weight and it evolved over time to be that perfect pairing of a carnivore diet, feasting, priming like you guys talk about, and then fasting because you're so satiated that you don't really need to eat. You're not hungry. You can go bother with other things. And that combination just triggers this amazing, consistent weight loss that stays off and actually accelerates your metabolism. I would very much assume that during the time that you learned about fasting, you didn't have low energy. I would assume your energy was great and your body felt warm and you wanted to go do things. And like, it's a total game changer. It broke my brain.
Wow. Do you incorporate fasting with your clients?
Great question. When I feel like it's going to be of help, I would love to get your opinion on this too. I tend to not do lots of longer fasts. I tend to tell everybody, like, whatever you call it, whether it's fasted or time restricted eating, I think for most people, most of the time, staying inside of 24 hours kind of checks most of the boxes for what most of what my clients kind of want. It's a little more difficult to do more extended fasting, although I think people can do it and it's fine. They just need to be careful about a certain things. So definitely like work with a coach who's experienced with that. But I just think if you're eating a true carnivore diet, you're eating the foods that sound good to you on that day, you're focusing mostly on things like red meat and eggs, and you're really, truly, truly, truly giving yourself permission to eat till you're fully satiated. I think anything inside of 24 hours becomes very, very easy. But again, I would love to hear your opinion on it. Is that something you incorporate with your people,
Absolutely.
and what kind of timeframes do you deal with?
Absolutely. So fasting, I do think, comes naturally when you're eating the right foods in the right amounts. And even on the carnivore journey, we can talk about some foods that can kind of hinder that we've noticed. And for me personally, like a dairy would be one that probably invokes more hunger than I need. So this all has to do with our hunger and our satiety signals. And so if we have a known that like that's going to trigger more hunger, the apple will trigger more hunger. We know that
Yes.
the pie is going to trigger more hunger. Well, there's a couple things in the carnivore space that can do that too, Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you. We do like to focus on a therapeutic fast. And so the difference on like a daily fast or a TRE, you do get some benefits absolutely with doing like an OMAD, which would be like a 23-hour fast. But I do like to challenge folks that if it's the right situation, if their hormones are in the right situation, if their thyroid's in the right situation, if they're feeling good, like we talked about, you're warm, you're not having this core cold, you're mentally, are coming along, that food freedom piece is coming along for you. You've gotten that calm piece. I do think that's a great time to step into fasting and to start doing like an alternate day type of an approach.
Cool.
Yeah, so we definitely have a way that I've learned to kind of formulate that. Raymond's taught me a lot about that. And so we have a way in SPG that we kind of do like a little priming up period. And so even like we have our huge priming that we start with, but then throughout the fasting process, we'll introduce what we call a home base, which is like 3 days of actually eating 2 meals a day, or you can actually eat a little bit more before you head into that skipping to get this push pull back and forth, very natural. Our body's always wanting that homeostasis, right? And so, but when you hit this way and it swings that way, it likes like that variety. It really responds to the variety of the timing. So I like fasting variation. But we don't do extended fast. We do long extended fast. So we will do an alternate day is about where we max out. And then every once in a while, we'll do a 72, because as you get into a 72-hour fast, you get an immune reset. I've
Very cool.
definitely have heard and read in the literature that, once or twice a year doing a 5-day fast can be very beneficial as a disease prevention, as a cancer prevention. It gets into a deep regeneration. So I'm actually on a 5-day fast right now. I'm on day 3. Dr. Kilt's
Nice.
post. Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel really good. I've kind of gotten past the slumpy, dumpy energy lull parts where I'm in a real peaceful zone. And yeah, Kilt's does those like twice a year. So I like to jump in when he's doing those. And that's about
Cool.
the right amount of time is to do those. So yeah.
I think that's totally reasonable. Yeah, I love that. And it is interesting. You mentioned that kind of energy lull. I have noticed that's like kind of like 24 to 36 hours into that type of a fast. I had a client once who was doing weekday fasts, and I would train him Tuesdays and Fridays. And so he would eat on Sunday, he'd come in on Tuesday, he'd be hungry for sure, and he'd have like a little bit of coffee or maybe some broth. He'd come in on Friday with no hunger, and he would set PRs on deadlifts. Like he would deadlift literally more than he ever had 5 days fasted. And it's like, wow, this stuff is really powerful and really amazing. And yeah, I've heard so much anecdote about people finding healing and, you know, resetting, like you said, or having a greater amount of autophagy happening in the body. And that all sounds very reasonable to me. That's great.
Oh, I love it. I want to hear when you're working with your low carb and carnivore clients and they're still having cravings, how do you help them deal with cravings and sweet cravings? Is that something that you run into a lot?
Yeah, definitely. We all live really busy, stressful lives. And you know, it's not like cocaine where you have to like seek it out or know a guy. Like go to your gas station and hardware store, and let alone the soda shops around my house that sell cookies the size of people's faces and buckets of soda. Like it's just everywhere and it tastes really good. And so people have it tough, and it's when you have a stressful life and it's everywhere and available, like it's really hard. So if I've got somebody who is experiencing a lot of cravings, I'm really wondering whether they're truly eating enough. I think we're
Yeah.
so used to reducing, detracting, counting, you know, measuring, holding ourselves back, and so many people I just don't really see, like I kind of alluded to earlier, give themselves permission to really be fully satiated. And so I'll always, you know, kind of ask where the cravings are coming in, like what time of day, and then kind of work backwards from there and say like, okay, you got a sugar craving at 3 p.m. What was your lunch like? And I'll hear like, yeah, it was a salad and some chicken, and I put some dressing on it, but it had an avocado. And it's like, that's fullness. You probably got pretty full from that meal. You probably stopped at a certain point and said like, yeah, that's good, but that's not satiation. Satiation is totally different. And so I often find that the meal before the cravings is a little thin and not quite as substantial as somebody needs. And so, you know, I describe like when my carnivore wife and I go to a Brazilian steakhouse, like I think I'm gonna, it's so funny. I never learned my lesson. I think I'm gonna be there for like 3 hours. And it's amazing. You're eating this food and it's so good and so tasty and you can't get enough. And like 30 minutes in, you're like, okay, uh, yeah, little palate fatigue. 45 minutes in, you're like, okay, I need a break. And then it's maybe like 1 or 2 bites later, I can hardly take this. Like this happened last time. They had ribeye. It was like Mother's Day or something. They had ribeye they don't normally have. I had it in my mouth, Emily. I had a piece of ribeye in my mouth. I couldn't do it. I could not get it. I couldn't chew. I had to spit it out, and I was done. And I knew I would be cursing myself the next day when I got hungry again. But like, I don't think people need to get to that level every time, but
Yes.
somewhere in the ballpark, like it's pretty astounding. You know, if you choose a low carb carnivore diet, like you can eat a lot of burger patties, a lot more than you thought. You can have more eggs than you ever thought, and you should try to push down that path until you're like, okay, I don't want this food anymore.
That is beautiful. You just intuitively kind of came to that. Now I understand why we're so simpatico and what your enthusiasm when you came to this priming, feasting, fasting talk. I'm really getting it because this is exactly what you have experienced. And I love what you're saying. Not every time. It doesn't have to, every time you eat doesn't have to be like that. We'll teach that when you're going through the priming. We do want people to do that for a full couple of weeks because it gives the body such an incredible reset. But that's a skill that you can always come back to. And so you're indicating the difference between satiety and how did you say that? You said it's different. Yeah.
Yeah, fullness versus satiety. Like you
Yeah.
can make yourself have your stomach be full by eating a salad with chicken, but I'm willing to bet that 2 or 3 hours later, you're not even hungry. You're hangry, or you'll eat anything, your energy's slumping, probably your blood sugar's crashing. There just wasn't the substance to really make you be truly satiated. I am just not that interested in food. I don't care. Like I can be around it. I don't want it right now. I'm not
Yeah.
looking for it. It's a totally different thing. And that can be different, like we talked about day to day. Like my first meal of the day, generally speaking, is going to be like hard-boiled eggs that I make. And I have, 10 kind of prepared. And some days I can throw down all 10. And other days I get to 5 and I'm like, I'm over eggs. I don't know what that's going to look like tomorrow. So I'm going to have another 10 ready to go, but I might eat 10, I might eat 5, or anything in between. There's just, you kind of get that really true satiety signal that, okay, you've got enough, you're done, go about your day, go do something different.
Yeah, and what we have seen too is when people get into these alternate day fast patterns, that the amount will oftentimes over time go down, that it gets them to get to true satiety. And
Yep.
so we're telling people, don't be scared about that. It freaks people out. Okay, all of it freaks them out. When it's time to eat big and they have the big appetite and they're at the Brazilian, then that is like different, something to get used to. And then as the body adjusts and becomes more efficient, to me, it's just like this sign that fat adaptation is coming into play and the body's becoming really efficient with the amount of food that it's given. So you've seen that too, that sometimes it can be a small amount.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I was fortunate enough to not only see it practically and see it every day by doing my carnivore coaching, but actually use the tools that we had, that metabolic cart, to actually measure and validate that yes, we are teaching people to burn fat. They're burning fat more effectively. We pair that with, again, weight loss and fat loss using body fat scales, and people can lose fat, almost nearly pure fat, without losing anything else at the same time if they're doing the right thing. So yeah, I could say practically, anecdotally, and scientifically, I have seen it all the time. It's cool.
I am so happy that you were in the learning zone doing that kind of work, even though you're gotten away from that a lot. But I feel like you have a very unique perspective on seeing people's metabolism and on literally seeing this on something that can measure this, that in a fasted state. I mean, we have the studies. There's a lot of studies that have shown this, people doing a calorie restriction versus an alternate day fast, that at the end, the alternate day fasters will have maybe the same weight loss, but they'll have more muscle and their body composition will be completely different.
Yep.
And so that was incredibly unique that you had that little window to literally see the metabolic effects in people's lives.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to get that experience and had enough time with it to come to the conclusions I had. It was cool.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, you are all about the exercise thing. So where are you at currently? What are you specifically recommending as far as, are you seeing people over exercising? What effects are you seeing of that? And where's that sweet spot for people?
Great question. Yeah, over exercising can be a huge problem, especially when it comes to cardiovascular exercise. People, and that mentality of, we need to track calories, we need to burn more calories than we eat. We'll get into a pattern of, okay, well, the best way to burn a lot of calories is to get on that treadmill until it tells me I burned 500 calories. And yeah, that teaches your body literally to become more efficient. And so, sounds good, and it is good. If you're a marathon runner, you do want to be more efficient and run 26.2 miles efficiently, but that's not great if you've got weight to lose. You want to be inefficient. So yeah, the biggest patterns I see is people doing over exercising with cardio, especially. And so, yeah, what I recommend for most people is whatever movement they really enjoy. I prefer walking, frankly. It's my favorite way to check out the neighborhood, watch the sunrise in the morning, get some sunlight. I think that's the healthiest activity all of us could be doing. I think it's a really linear benefit. I don't think there's like a U-shaped curve where it ceases to become beneficial. I think walking can always be beneficial if you're not hurt and you can do a little bit more. I think that's great. Even little habits like parking at the very furthest parking spot you can find, that adds up over a long period of time. The other thing that I really want to promote to people is strength training. So using some type of resistance, working on that resistance, and taking yourself to a point that you're sending a signal to your body that it is not strong enough in its current iteration. So I prefer to have my people work at a slower tempo, pushing a weight. It could be a chest press or a row. They could use a band or a machine. Moving slow means they're never going to be able to get hurt doing that activity. So you could do this with a 12-year-old, you could do it with a 92-year-old. But the important thing is to get to this point of you just can't really push the weight that much more. You are at your limit of where your strength is, which it forces the body to get stronger and build up lean tissue, not only muscle mass, but also things like bone density, connective tissue that holds it all together. It's got a sense of intensity to it, but it's not anything that you would be like breathing in and out through your mouth. You can do this nose breathing. But I do think it's really important to send the signal to the body that it does need to get stronger. That makes the body inefficient, which means it will burn more calories all the time to be able to do that, which helps with fat loss. That's, I think, the healthiest thing you can do. And the good news for most people is they don't need to do that very often to unlock the benefits of that. I don't think we give ourselves nearly enough like recovery time in between those types of workouts. An example I stole from somebody, probably Dr. Doug McGuff, who talks about this a lot, is like if you look at your hands or your arms or something and find like a cut that you had, it might look like a little bit inflamed or red or like it hasn't fully healed. That thing might be like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks old. Like it takes a long time to heal these kinds of things. And what you're doing when you're moving a weight very slowly, like pretty close to failure, you're ripping up your muscles, and that takes time and energy to replenish. And so if you're not noticing that you are objectively getting stronger in the gym, you're lifting more weight or heavier bands, I think you probably need a little bit more recovery time, and then use that recovery time to have a very challenging workout intensity wise. And so that's kind of what I promote. As a personal trainer, I was trained in like what we call functional training, which is like, I'm a hockey player. So let's do all the things that look like hockey, but let's do it in the gym. And you're swinging a stick like a hockey stick, and maybe you're jumping back and forth like you're skating on the ice, but none of that is hockey. Go play hockey. That's the only way you can get better at hockey. Be on the ice with your buds in the context of how the sport is played versus trying to mimic it somewhere else on a different surface using different equipment. And so I want to use the gym and resistance to make people very strong, and then let them go practice the skill of whatever they want to get better at on their own. And that's gotten really good results. I've been really happy with how that works. And like I said, you could buy a $30 set of bands. You could work out probably 20, 30 minutes a week, and that would be sufficient. You could really make some inroads in your strength and overall health.
So you're doing it for a much shorter period of time, but it's pretty intense. When you're going about this correctly, because you want it to cause enough stimulus to sort of get the body out of balance in a way so that it responds.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Your body loves efficiency and it hates inefficiencies. That's just how we evolved. It doesn't want to get stronger if it doesn't have to. It doesn't want to move if it doesn't have to. And so, yeah, it is intense for sure. Like you get to this point in the set where, if you're counting reps or your time or whatever, like that's fine. That gives you a metric. I tell people like we count reps, but reps don't count.
Yeah.
Whether you did 15 or 25, like, all right, that's cool. But what I'm after is that signal, and you only get to that signal by pushing through that uncomfortableness of like, what can you truly do moving this weight or resistance? And so, yeah, it's almost like an anxiety or this like panic where you're like, I don't think I can do any more than this. And then maybe just give it like a few more pulses, maybe you stop and do like a second set and try to go a little bit further. But the point is, yes, exactly what you said. You described it perfectly. Like you want to tell your body it needs to get strong.
An intentional stress that you're putting on that. So
Yep.
we were at that low carb, and there was a talk that I missed it. It was a zone 2. Do you have feedbacks on that? Just because you're such an exercise person, know all exercise things. I just wanted to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So zone 2 would be in the category of what I would say movement is. And so when I was measuring people's metabolic rates and looking at different heart rate zones, that would be based on fat burning. And zone 2 is the zone that really promotes fat burning the most. If you're using a heart rate monitor and you don't do the metabolic testing, a great place to start is using Phil Maffetone's equation, which is 180 minus your age, and try to stay in that realm, give or take 3 to 5 beats. Stay in there. If you don't even have a heart rate monitor, be asking yourself as you're doing movement, what is my current level of difficulty 1 to 10? And you want to hang out around a 5. So I still bike. I don't bike as much as I used to, and it's enjoyable. I love it. I do it for the fun of it. If you told me it was unhealthy, I would still do it, but I just make sure that I'm kind of in that zone for most of what I'm doing. I'm not doing terribly hard workouts. I'm just trying to keep myself around a 5 out of 10 and focusing on nose breathing, and that can burn a lot of fat for people.
Oh my goodness. So I've done that at different times. It's like a very slow jog for me, or like a fast walk. But I've looked at that Maffetone chart. I think for me, I can't remember what, I think it has been about 130 or something like that. But I have just noticed that my fitness level and how much I can accomplish, it increases substantially. Like it comes around really quickly. And I don't do it necessarily for the fat burning, although that's great. but I do it for the joy of it. And it keeps me in like this, it's to me, like staying in that kind of a zone just keeps it therapeutic for me mentally.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. That's great.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna look through my questions here. I know I have more. So when people are just starting, what are your tips for starting an exercise?
Starting an exercise, really just choose something you enjoy and try not to overstep your bounds too much. Just,
Yeah.
if it's going a short walk, that's fine. I would try to challenge yourself, but yeah, people love the exercise portion of things. They think it's sexy. It's on the Gatorade commercials, and we love our athletes and things like that. But like, if you don't have your nutrition straight, you're probably not going to have good energy anyway. So work on the nutrition. When you start to feel an increase in energy, nobody's going to be able to stop you from exercise. You're going to feel so good. You're just going to do it naturally. So I really want people to start with, getting the fats and proteins and do whatever activity they enjoy doing. We can add some of that other stuff in later on.
Oh, I love it. Great advice. I have enjoyed this conversation so much, Casey. I've learned so much, and you're just an incredible, prolific, curious person, and is just putting so much beautiful information out into this world. I thank you for your work. It's incredible.
Well, thank you very much. It was so great to connect with you, and I love chatting with you as well. Your positive and optimistic energy is just so infectious, and yeah, your story is amazing, and it's just been such an honor to hang out with you today.
Thank you, Casey.